Hello, everyone, and welcome to What's the News. This week is a reminder that just because something is presented as progress doesn't mean it actually is. There are a lot of moving pieces right now, locally and globally. And if you're not paying attention, it's very easy to miss what's really happening. So let's break it down. Please like, share, comment, all the things. So, in New York, Zoran has officially been in charge for more than 100 days. And to honor this, he gave a speech. During his speech, he announced that the first city run grocery store would be opening in East Harlem. Now, I don't know much about the population of New York, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are a healthy amount of Muslims in East Harlem. He stated, now some will insist that city owned businesses do not work, that government cannot keep up with corporations. My answer to them is simple. I look forward to the competition. May the most affordable grocery store win. Zoran's goal is to open this store next year and continue with an additional 5 stores in each of the 5 boroughs of the city. He's projected to spend around $30 million on this project. These stores would operate without paying rent or taxes as a part of an effort to make groceries more affordable. You might be wondering how this is going to be funded. Zoran's plan is to redirect existing subsidies New York provides for existing private supermarkets. Additional funds would come from, you guessed it, tax increases on corporations and high income earners. He's fighting capitalism one grocery store at a time. The grocery stores were announced after he announced that he plans to overhaul infrastructure across the city, including major street upgrades and expanding the bike lanes and pedestrian spaces. I personally feel like bike lanes are some of the stupidest things ever. I'm all for bikers having their own paths to ride. However, this is one of the most unsafe ideas anyone has ever. Why does your bicycle that can only get up to maybe 10, 15 miles an hour need to be on the street next to my car that weighs tons? And I get that some people are like, well, I want to save the earth. And my response is the earth has survived some pretty crazy things long before you, and it will continue to survive long after you. How is you causing a safety hazard helping the world function any better? And I've seen these people bring children on bikes in streets too. That should be illegal because you can have the best helmet in the world, but it is no match for a car. But I guess if you voted for him, you believe that Zoran is making New York great again. He also highlighted the spread of childcare centers in Queens, the Bronx, and Staten Island. And he openly stated that these places would deliver the change that democratic socialism can deliver. Let's pause. The Muslim population is spreading like an overgrown malignant. They tend to have many children because to them being a martyr is the same as being a messiah. And now he's openly claiming that this is directly connected to socialism, in other words, the government, which is your taxes, funding widespread childcare. Now, another state with an overgrowing Muslim population also had a statewide childcare program. Have we so easily forgotten about the Somali Muslim fraud that hasn't even fully been uncovered in Minnesota? Anyhow, our favorite weird great uncle, Bernie Sanders, also made an appearance at this event and stated working class people die at a significantly younger age than the elderly has to do with diet. Sanders also said working people, low income people cannot afford the decent quality food that their kids and the whole family need. And the result of that is all across this country. It's funny. I was listening to something recently that was saying it makes such little sense how people spend so much money at the grocery store. And then went on to explain it's because people at the grocery store aren't just paying for food, they're paying for convenience. And it's the convenience of not having to know how to cook a well rounded meal or even to cook at all. The convenience of not having to buy whole natural ingredients. The convenience of not having to take the time to actually create a healthy meal. Most people buy their food in a box or in a bag, but you're not just paying for the food, you're paying for the recipe, you're paying for the trials and the errors, the production, the transportation, the packaging, the people who unload the vehicles, the marketers, the people who load the shelves, the people who ring you up, all because you wanted to buy Betty Crocker instead of buying flour, cacao, baking powder, vanilla, eggs, milk, and whatever else goes into actually baking a cake or making cookies or muffins. Women got so lost trying to have the same rights as men and trying to compete with men that they forgot the value that we have in creating a nurturing, healthy, whole environment. And it might take a little bit more patience, but it's so much more rewarding. Moving on. According to the latest individual tax refund figures, the average refund for individual filers is up 11.1%. The administration had been saying for some time that this would be a gigantic refund season due to changes enacted through Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Although this is a significant increase, it happens to sit under the White House's projected increase. I haven't gotten my refund yet, but this is positive news. Next up, a Chinese national pled guilty to smuggling bacteria into the United States by concealing them in a ship falsely labeled as women's underwear. He admitted that samples of E. coli bacterial samples were hidden inside a package shipped from China to his Bloomington, Indiana residence. Federal authorities said that he received the materials from a Chinese science focused company while working as a postdoctoral researcher in Indiana University's biology department. This comes after the FBI had been investigating after identifying suspicious shipments from China to students at this university in late 2025. Investigators found it strange that he was allegedly ordering women's underwear from a company that focused on science and technology. E. coli is a bacteria that can potentially cause serious health risks. However, most strains are harmless and are a part of a normal, healthy gut, and they actually aid with digestion and vitamin production. It's not yet known what strand of E. coli he was smuggling into the country. During the investigation, it was also discovered that he is a part of the Chinese Communist Party, which he initially lied about when questioned by immigration authorities. Now, there have been so many conversations surrounding immigration and this country lately. And this, again, further validates the necessity of strict immigration and visa laws, especially with countries that we know smile in our face and stab us in the back. I'm all for immigration. Many of my friends are immigrants, but they did it legally. And furthermore, they became functional parts of this American based society. Doesn't mean that they don't celebrate and respect their culture, but what it does mean is that they respect the culture of this place enough to assimilate. I think that we need to have an assimilation process because this letting people in all willy nilly, like America is the world's group home, is clearly not working out for us. We must be in the twilight zone because Ilhan Omar was recently on a podcast, which why on earth are elected Congress members spending their time on podcasts? I feel like whenever Trump is speaking with reporters or talking to someone on the news or even a podcast, unless it's like an official report, they're either coming wherever he is or he's doing it over the phone. And I could be misremembering, but why do all of these elected officials have so much time to be on podcasts and going to the Met Gala and doing all of these talks and entertaining people? Like, don't you have a job to do? But, anyways, Ilhan said that former allies of President Trump who spoke out against the war in Iran should be given credit and should be open to putting her arms around them. She said, I think as Americans, it's really important for us to work together for the preservation of everything that is good in our country and to support the leaders that we can trust to safeguard what is good of our country. Now, this is quite rich coming from someone who likely is not even a citizen because of her own issues with her citizenship path, on top of the fact that she is a Somali who has likely taken part and benefited from the billion-dollar fraud happening in her state. But hey, Takia works on liberals and conservatives just alike. Remember, Allahu Akbar means the same thing to a polished person at a congressional podium as it means to an unhinged person with their finger on a button ready to blow something up. Minnesota and California have recently sought to set new limits on when and how antique and classic cars can be driven with vintage vehicles. In Minnesota, the House is attempting to, quote unquote, explicitly define what it means to operate a vehicle solely as a collector's item and restrict when these can be driven in the state. In California, a bill called Leno's Law would expand emissions exemptions for older models with collector's insurance. Apparently, in California, antique vehicles are typically restricted to use in exhibitions, tours, and other special events, and cannot be used as a regular mode of transportation unless the owner can demonstrate the vehicles are in an appropriate condition. First of all, who defines what is appropriate? And doesn't a car have to be in an appropriate condition in order to drive? In Florida, vehicles over 30 years of age are registered with antique license plates. Such cars cannot be used for regular commuting. In Texas, vehicles over 25 years of age are registered with classic and antique license plates, and the car is also not allowed to be used for commuting or commercial purposes. In New York, cars over 25 years of age are considered antique and face restrictions on when they can be driven on public roads, although they are exempt from regular safety inspection. In Georgia, cars over 25 years of age are also exempt from regular safety inspections. They can be driven on public roads, however, they must primarily be used for exhibitions and special events. But fortunately, in Georgia, there are no emissions testings, so that makes things significantly smoother. In Pennsylvania, classic cars can bypass regular safety inspections and emissions testings, but the cars can only be used for exhibition tours and occasional recreational use. Obviously, this is either a money grab and or an opportunity to try to get people into cars that have computers that can be controlled. Call me crazy, but if you are the type of person to spend the time to make, for instance, a Ford from 79 or a 67 Mustang actually functional, it's probably running well and safe. Someone that's truly obsessed with cars wouldn't be having any crazy issues with their cars. But it is what it is. To close off our news in the States, I would like to play a short clip for you.
Salam alaikum, everyone. I'm Rami Youssef.
Oh, it almost Elmo. Mr. Rami, what does salam alaikum mean?
Well, salam means peace, and it's a way to say hello in Arabic.
Oh, cool. Oh, salam alaikum, everybody.
here is my response to said clip.
He's snatching your people up, trying to rape them, so y'all need to hide your kids, hide your wife, and hide your husband because they raping everybody out here.
Now let's go overseas. A self-proclaimed troll, Johnny Somali, caused outrage after filming himself making obscene gestures on a statue commemorating wartime sex slaves. Because of this, he's going to prison in South Korea for 6 months. Now, what did he do? He kissed a statue. Now, is that inherently bad or negative or whatever? No, of course not. However, he also decided to give the statue a lap dance. I don't understand what possesses people to do things like this, and I also don't know how people find things like this funny. Humor has been downgraded to senseless, trivial behavior. And since when is doing something that an 8-year-old boy would do funny? I wonder if this is somehow related to the fact that IQ is consistently decreasing with each new generation. In Paris, a former silverware keeper for the French presidential palace was found guilty of stealing hundreds of thousands of euros worth of luxury items between the years 2023 and 2025 with his partner. They sold most of the items through Facebook and had already pocketed around 15,000 euros. The crime was discovered when the national porcelain manufacturer that makes many of the valuable plates for the presidential palace saw some of the items listed on auction sites. They were sentenced with 2 years in prison. If you have ever wanted to go to Berlin, you may have an interesting opportunity to do so for free. Visitors could receive vouchers for this summer to pick up litter. They're taking notes from Copenhagen, linking green behavior with enjoyable rewards. People in America don't even like to pick up their own trash. So we'll see if they decide to pick up the trash of people they have never met in a country that they have zero attachment to. What's funny is I think it's such a beautiful idea. However, with the state of integrity and the lack of respect so many people have, I think that it's just foolish. Because how do you monitor something like this? How do you hold people accountable? Even if you have them do the work before they get the reward, there's some people that are like, well, I'm not going to do it unless I'm going to get paid. So there's just so many layers to it. Anyone who chooses to take part by collecting trash or supporting social projects receives benefits at museums, participating restaurants, or Berlin experiences. The goal is to encourage conscious behavior by and on the water because Berlin's theme of the year is water tourism. The program is set to be launched in summer 2026. Definitely a meaningful project. I just wish there were more functional people in this world. Or maybe they're just in hiding because the minority of humans have gone absolutely batshit crazy. Now to the Islamic Republic. As of today, when we're recording, the ceasefire is still in effect. But when we release, the period will technically be over. Now, there are reports that this ceasefire was strategic for the US because due to a lot of the bombings, the Islamic Republic's missile launchers were disabled because they were buried, but not necessarily destroyed. And because the US knew this and also knows that Iran only cares about destruction, they decided to go along with the ceasefire. Remember, in last week's episode, I said there's absolutely no reason that Trump should have accepted a ceasefire so quickly. He is a businessman and not a dumb one. So the only reason that anyone would accept a negotiation so quickly is because you just want to get along with the process. What is the process? The Islamic Republic is now digging out all of their missile launchers. They have not been able to shoot much towards Israel, and that's one of their main focuses. So digging out their missile launchers and making them usable fast is one of their top priorities. When they dig them out, they're literally waving red flags asking to be destroyed. Also, like, obviously, this was not a real ceasefire because troops are being actively sent to the Middle East. Also, Iran decided that they were going to create problems in the Strait of Hormuz again. And they also don't want to negotiate anymore. Surprise. All jokes aside, the levels of inner turmoil and obviously outer turmoil that the Iranian people are enduring is just so sad. And frankly, they did ask for this almost 50 years ago. However, it's such an awful situation, and I pray for their safety and a quick solution. Now, apparently, Mojtaba Khamenei is no longer in a coma, but only one person, the IRGC commander, is actually allowed to see him. And he's the only person that's following the directives of Mojtaba. We've heard of Takia, right? Just a note, weakness fights until the end because it has everything to lose. Strength chooses when to engage and when not to engage because it has nothing to lose. So let's go to Israel. The IDF killed a terrorist near Hebron after a terrorist infiltration siren sounded. They reported that the terrorist was armed with a knife. Fortunately, no injuries were reported from the infiltration. During a raid, soldiers found improvised weapons and military equipment like a vest and helmet. So, Naftali Bennett is launching a national plan to expand accessibility and inclusion for people with disabilities. While speaking at an event, he outlined a plan to raise employment among people with advance accessibility technologies, incentivize businesses to become accessible, and create a track for people with disabilities to integrate into the IDF. He said there are 1.2 million people in Israel with disabilities, and the state has failed at integrating them into society. I would like to say this is such a touchy subject because, unfortunately, due to the nasty, judgmental nature of humans, people tend to shield or even hide their children that have disabilities because they don't want to be scrutinized, and they also don't want their kids to be scrutinized and left out. I don't believe that this is something that the government can control. Obviously, on a surface level, they can, but the deeper level lies with the people. God forbid we actually give grace and love to the people that it's hardest for us to give grace and love to. Anyhow, he also said that companies that hired people with disabilities would receive tax credits. And then, of course, he did what every politician does best: pander. He said that advancing the country's accessible technologies would make the country a light amongst the nations. Sounds religious enough for the right, but it also is for the left because the left just loves to help people. I've personally been involved with an organization called Best Buddies for quite some time now, and we work specifically with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to integrate them into society more. And it's such an amazing blessing to be a part of and to witness. And I truly hope that Naftali is being genuine about wanting to make a difference for people with disabilities. Because if this is a political ploy, which frankly is highly likely, that would be absolutely disgusting. And it would also show just how much of a light that he is. Another story in politics: there is a new reservist party whose campaign is specifically against Haredi and Arab parties because they feel that those who do not serve shouldn't vote or run for the Knesset. Interesting. It sounds good in theory, but initially I'm getting this like kind of armed militia vibe, if that makes sense. But let's keep going. A reservist leader said that in the elections, the serving public will change the picture. The elections will determine whether a government is formed that relies on ultra Orthodox parties and Arab parties, or a Zionist government that relies on reservists. When I hear that, it can make sense. The party is comprised of reserve soldiers, their families, wounded veterans, bereaved families, and civilian volunteers. The party positions itself as a response to the leadership vacuum following the Hamas attacks of October 7th and calls for universal conscription. Among its main principles is that it will not sit in a government with any party whose members do not serve in the IDF. It's such a tough thing because just because someone doesn't serve in the military doesn't necessarily make them an unworthy leader. The reservist party is sick of carrying the ultra orthodox and the Arab public on their backs, which is completely fair. It's interesting because it's really different here in the US, but that's because our military is completely voluntary. And in Israel, it's mandatory for most. So it could definitely feel like a slap in the face, like it's completely disrespectful. I totally get that. But they also stated governments that rely on non Zionist elements are extorted into making non Zionist decisions. And that's an extremely compelling point. And also 100% true. Most Arabs can't serve in the military. So, why exactly do they get to decide the fate of the people who are thrown in the first line of fire to protect them? And let's not discuss that although there's an even keel for the most part between Jewish Israelis and Arab Israelis, there's still a law that needs to be passed stating that Arabs can only be 20% of the population. And if they can only be 20%, then whatever they think or believe should only have a 20% weight in making national choices. And let's not even talk about the Haredi. That's all we have for you this week. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you on the next one.